talk to you today about Ruby 1.9. Ruby 1.9 is not new news, but I have a sinking suspicion many of you with large production apps, often carried under that legacy banner, may not be on Ruby 1.9 yet. A year ago, New Relic was not on Ruby 1.9, and we were like, oh, you know, it's really hard. It is hard, but it is not insurmountable. Today, we're going to try and tell you how we did it and tell it to you in a way that you can go home and maybe not, do it this afternoon, but get started on that process and actually switch over.
And not just that, but I think there's a pattern here that we'll talk about that is applicable to more than just your Ruby upgrades, but your Rails upgrades and your whatever upgrades.
Yeah, it's time to get to 2.0 now anyway. We have to change all these slides. So briefly, I'm Nick. I'm with the site engineering team at New Relic. That's the thing. Oh.
And I'm Ralph. I'm with the core app team in New Relic. So we build the big Rails app that we're going to be talking about here.
And we make sure that it stays running in a production environment. The ability of these two teams to work together, and in this case actually, share people back and forth, was really important to us going through this process. The site engineering team is not kept off in a cave away from development. Well, I mean it is, but it's not in a logical cave. So the people on that team are Rubyists. They know how to do Ruby. The people on the development team know how things run operationally. So we were able to actually move over the hurdles as we came to and work together on this stuff. We, in this case, is New Relic, as Kobe briefly introduced. The New Relic product itself is application performance monitoring for Ruby, Python, Java, .NET, etc. And it helps you find out when your app is slow. And one of the things it was telling us was that our app was slow. We, in the case of the work that was done, isn't really us. Ralph and I both contributed to this project. We did real code work. But we, by no means, were the only people doing the work.
Yeah, basically everybody who was involved in the core app team, and there were probably 25 people total who worked on that app and then some of the other smaller apps. We all did something related to it. Also the Ruby agent team and also the site engineering team. But these four folks probably did most of the heavy lifting. And one of them is sitting right over there, John Guyman, pictured right above me. Hi, John. Bill Kaiser on the left, our spiritual leader. Jonathan Owens, and then Andrew Bloomgarden. And these are the folks who just did lots of the hard work. And they're not here because they're doing more hard work, and we're just here talking and having a beer.
So that's a little bit about us. You already know all the great syntax changes and performance reasons and other great ideas on why you should be running Ruby 1.9. This is just a little extra push if for some reason you're still holding on to 1.8.
Is anybody actually using 1.8 still, Nick? Yeah.
So
that's okay, it's okay.
Ruby 1.9 has been out for a long time now. It's not new software. It's fully supported. 1.8 is really, really going to stop support. So if you are running 1.8 in production, you are probably running Ruby Enterprise Edition because of the performance characteristics. It's already end of life. People submit bugs to that mailing list, and they get guff. They do not get fixes. The rest of Ruby 1.8 is going that way very soon.
So this is some data from New Relic, because we have a lot of Ruby users. And so you can tell that all the cool kids, or at least more than half of them, are using 1.9 or 2.0. But that's a big chunk of people. I think that's several thousand apps that are still running 1.8.7 and pay no attention to the 1.8.6. But so there's still a lot of this work to be done in teams all around, and so we can hopefully this stuff we're going to talk about how we did it will be applicable.
All right. So now you know all the great reasons, kind of reminded you why you should upgrade to 1.9. The common reasons why you don't upgrade to 1.9 are people say, well, my app is really big, the app is legacy, it's going to be really hard for us to update it, and we can't stop development on it while we do it. We also have an app that is somewhat big and is somewhat legacy. I looked back into our Git history when preparing this deck, and our first commit was in July of 2007. It was Rails version 1.2.3. We are now running 3.0 on the same code base. It is just kind of keep upgrading, keep polishing. At the time of the 1.9 switch, we had 70,000 code lines, or code LOC, and 59,000 test LOC, according to that wonderful opinionated rake stats. And of course, we were running Ruby Enterprise Edition, which was hurtling towards irrelevancy. The biggest concern wasn't just the size of the code base, though. We were really worried about stopping work. Shopify did their, I think it was their 3.0 conversion. They wrote a lot about, people talk about their big app conversions, and it's never been a happy story. They say, oh, we had to dedicate a ton of engineers, we couldn't ship any features. So we were worried about this. And like many people who were worried, we did some dumb things first.
Yeah, so we just decided, it's too hard, we're not going to do it. And then we finally felt the pain more and more. So we thought, great, it's the perfect opportunity. We're going to re-architect things so that we have a few smaller pieces that we can then gradually upgrade those to 1.9, and then it'll just, everything will be easier, and we'll get some big wins in having a less complex app. Yeah, we did a lot of talking about that, not so much doing. And then we thought, okay, well, we're just going to have to bite the bullet and do it all at once. And we're just going to have to kind of freeze the things we're working on. And we quickly decided that wasn't going to work.
John Guyman, sitting there in the audience, set forth on a one-day FedEx project to convert the code base. That went famously well.
Maybe worth a try, but it didn't work for us. And then we thought, great, so the obvious solution is we're going to work in a branch. Everything's going to be cool. Development happens over here on master, and we don't have to worry about slowing anybody down. And then when it comes time, we might be doing a little merging, but it should be fine. But that also proved to be a pretty bad idea when we started to do those merging back of changes. It was immediately apparent that it was going to be really painful.
So here we were. We had this branch that had to be completely, or reset against master all the time. It had its own kind of set of tests and changes that had been made in it with 1.9. But we couldn't maintain it. So we started again. We said, everybody who does continuous deployment now, which hopefully is almost everybody now, at least talks about it, knows the big idea. Do everything on master. If you are doing a continuous deployment system, use feature flags, you actually integrate all of your changes onto master all the time and push them out into production even though they're not live. This is the pattern that we were able to follow. So we took that 1.9 branch and we landed it. And we made sure that it had its own CI job. So we can tell at any given point whether it's working. So now instead of having a question like, oh, is this code 1.8 or is this code 1.9? We use Jenkins, so we had two Jenkins jobs, one that ran in 1.8 for every build, and one that ran the exact same code, but under 1.9.
And the 1.9 job was completely on fire from the beginning. And it wasn't even complete to start, but we had something that we could start then to work on, and we know, when we broke production with something that we were doing to try to get 1.9 to work. So it was really important to have those jobs set up in parallel. And a lesson that we still carried on from the early desire to, let's re-architect the app to have smaller pieces. Well, we did try this whole process with smaller pieces so that we could get the whole upgrade done with an app that's just pretty tiny, and work out some of the kinks, like how do we deploy this to production. So we worked a lot of those things out with things that were less risky.
So to get going, we had to do a lot of foundation work. It turns out that the huge part of the work for getting us to 1.9 had nothing at all to do with Ruby 1.9. It was get our app in shape where it could run multiple versions. So first thing we had to do was make sure that we were on a new enough version of Rails 2.3 that we could support 1.9 at all. So we got all of our upgrades taken care of. Hopefully all of you are also upgraded for security reasons now. That's kind of a new fun thing. The next thing was we had to come up with an infrastructure for switching Ruby versions. Luckily, the community has done some great work on this, meant for development mostly. So we used rbenv, and we use it on our workstations. We use it in our CI system. We use it in staging, and we use it in production. That change of switching our production environment from using a static path to Ruby 1.8 to using rbenv to Ruby 1.8 occupied a lot of the time in the rollout of this product, but it was crucial. Because once we were able to have our production Ruby under a version manager, then we could switch back and forth anywhere we wanted in the whole stack with an environment variable. The next item, bundler. Terrence is here somewhere. It's totally awesome.
Thank you, bundler guys.
Especially with the introduction of bundlers platforms. Bundlers platform selection between Ruby 1.8 and 1.9 meant that we could have the incompatible gems fenced off in their own little areas, but still create a single coherent gem file lock, which our deployment process relies on.
To roll out any big change, you've got to have some test coverage so that you can be pretty confident that the changes you're making are going to break stuff. So we didn't really ramp up coverage to do this upgrade, but we sort of started off with reasonable test coverage. It was better than 50%.
I think it was 76% at the time of the switch.
But we definitely uncovered places where we realized after kind of toward the tail end of the process that we had big holes in some of our coverage. So this was a good exercise in uncovering and then filling those holes.
So we've got our foundational elements, kind of our prereqs. We start on the hard part, which is getting the test suite to run. If you just take your Ruby 1.8 based apps test suite and put it under 1.9 and hit rake, it's not going to run. It's going to blow up. There's going to be something weird with it. There's a lot of load path issues, stuff like that. Just prevented the test suite from even completing. I don't even care about failures or errors. I mean, it just needed to get to the end. So a lot of work was done to get that test suite to finish at all. Once that was done, we had to start in on the third-party gems and plugins and such that we used that absolutely just would not work with 1.9. Notably, we spent a lot of time replacing Ruport. By we, I mean Jonathan Owens. And a lot of time replacing Mongrel. Mongrel was certainly not at the time 1.9 compatible, probably isn't now. Being stick-in-the-mud legacy app, we were still on Mongrel. So we had to switch that out for Unicorn. Again, all of these changes were not done in a branch. These changes were all done in our master environment and pushed to production. So our production 1.8 environment slowly lost its 1.8 dependencies. So we're still running 1.8, but we're on rbenv now. We're still running 1.8, but we're on Unicorn now, and we've ditched stupid Ruport. And just follow that pattern, everything we did. And then the big kind of time-elapsed area, just grind down the test failures.
Yeah, this took a few months. I think we first started in on the preparatory work in, what was it, March? And then we were done in early September.
And that doesn't count the time we spent denying that we needed to do this work.
Yeah, we spent a lot of time on that.
Our
important work.
Big plans for summer of 2011 were switched to Ruby 1.9.
Yeah. So in that long period, we weren't sort of fully, there wasn't one person who was doing this full time even. There were periods where we were just kind of gradually burning down the tests that were failing. And so we didn't stop the world for any of this. And there were many times when, looking back over the history of doing this, there were things where, people were just, they were shipping other projects. And so they would kind of quit looking at the Ruby 1.9 stuff for a week or two. So it was pretty gradual, but it just took a long time.
But it meant that because we had our CI job up, even if you were not working on the 1.9 project at all, the new code that you were committing was being checked against 1.9. So if that section of code was at least executable under 1.9, so the test was completing, you would know whether the new code you'd written had introduced more 1.9 regressions. So that's the big picture of how we did it. 1.9 has a lot of behavioral changes that are small on paper, but in a suitably large app, they get whipped around at a pretty high speed, and they will burn you. So I want to just go over a couple of the quick things that we hit on the road there. This is by no means an exhaustive list. As Ralph said, these two teams, there was somebody working on this on and off for like 5 months. And so it was a big code base. It took us a long time, and we went down some blind alleys. The first big win was, here's that bundler gem file syntax, platform Ruby 1.9, platform Ruby 1.8. This was huge. It saved us a ton of time once this feature came out.
That was bundler 1.1, I think.
I think, yeah. You know, in the top there, we say, well, when we're in 1.9, you have to use debugger instead of in 1.8, you use Ruby debug. So we put this in the gem file. Now the gem file works under both versions. A couple other gems there that only work in one or the other. Faster CSV is a library we used in Ruby 1.8. In 1.9, the CSV support is built in. This is a great one.
Yeah. So this was something to work around a change in the error message that was output if Rails couldn't find a file that it was trying to load. And so with, I think with 1.9.3 in particular, the error message was different. And so now we had to kind of add this regular expression so that the error message wouldn't get thrown as an exception, but that it would get handled by this weird way that Rails handles finding files to load.
Big thanks to the person linked there in Bitly. I forget who originally wrote this. It wasn't us.
Yeah, we stole this.
Thug life.
This was a pretty fun one. So this is one of those things we did to avoid kind of a trap that we suspected we could get caught by. And you know, there's lots of people who had blogged about 1.9 upgrade issues and things that had changed in 1.9. So it's one of those things that we realized, gosh, we could be doing this in our code, and it's probably not what we're really not doing what we think we're doing. We shouldn't be using the array operator on a numeric type.
Does anybody know what that does?
Anyone? Any guesses?
It's a bit slicing operator on the numeric types.
Obvious.
So it gives you the 1 or 0 value of that bit in the number. That's, I mean, yeah, that's probably what you want. It's very useful. This knowledge of this feature comes to us by way of Marcus's usually devious hangmans from PDX Ruby. So if for any of you who have thought that a hangman is a waste of time, this is code that shows you can learn something right there. This code did get tripped in our app. During our tests, we hit this. There was a place where we had a variable coming through that we thought was an array, but it sometimes could be the number of elements in the array instead of the array itself. That was great. Yeah. This pattern we used a lot. So in 1.8, we were getting a string, and in 1.9, we were getting a symbol. We want the same code to have this, or to have the same effect under 2 different environments. So we have to force the casting. So all throughout our code, you'll see these things like this, where we're looping through the instance methods and ensuring that they're symbols, or any other type of returns. If you upgrade from the MySQL gem to the MySQL2 gem, your code will also look like this, because MySQL2 gem reports numbers as numbers and not as strings containing the number. And so in order to enforce the same behavior in 2 different environments, you need to just say, well, I don't know what I'm going to get. Force it to be a symbol, then write the code once for a case where it's a symbol.
No conditionals, just do it, standardize on something.
And then here's the conditional variety. I mentioned faster CSV earlier, but we just used plain CSV in Ruby 1.9. This slightly tortured piece of code extracted exactly as is from our code base. checks to figure out if we're using the weird old CSV, and if we are, it pulls in faster CSV, uses remove constant to get rid of the old one, and then constant assigns there with the equals. Classes in Ruby are just constants. You can actually set them.
What would code climate say about this?
I don't even want to know. I've never checked. You know, it's got a little bit of C2 complexity. It's pretty straightforward otherwise, right? I don't think, is remove const penalized by flog? Oh, send.
Object.send. What?
People who don't like send. Come on. Here's another weird one. The exact semantics of load paths changed in 1.9. The result of this was that people's local development environments didn't work under 1.9 because they would type script server and it would just bail. Our script server is just a little stub put there by Ruby 2.3.0 or Rails 2.3.0 or something, you know, back in the dawn of time. It had never been updated, so it broke. There's easy ways to fix this, and so this just updated it to the current, at the time, 2.3.14. But this particular pattern was throughout our code. We may have spent more time on this load path fix pattern than on any of the other behavioral changes, just because each of our background scripts just everywhere, all of our tests, this is just going to be everywhere. You just learn how to fix it, and you just fix it every place it crops up. There's no magic trick. Other than the stuff I've covered, there's also these great items. We could have showed you some code for each one of these, but it's not really important how they're each fixed. Super kind of very high level, lambda arity will bite you if you do bad things with lambdas, and turns out we used background job, which did. The difference between a proc and a lambda and things like that matters in 1.9. Ordered hashes are now the default in 1.9. You wouldn't think that would break anything. It turns out that we were relying on the unordered ordering. Whoops.
So yeah, lots of little things, and these are all things that you can just kind of Google about and find out lots of war stories about how people fix them.
Jonathan Owens detailed to me at great length what that regex change was, and it went completely over my head. So I'm sure it's complicated. So now you've done it. You've got your tests green. Everything's ready to go. Now, for clarity, our tests went green in June?
Yeah, I think it was June.
In June, we launched in mid-September on 1.9. So from green test to launch was actually a fair amount of time. So we had to go through the rest of this environmental changes. But when we were ready, we followed this plan relatively well. The idea is you've now made what version you're running part of your environment, not part of your app. Your app at this point will run under both environments just fine. So now we've switched them environment by environment. We say local dev, so everybody's workstations, now 1.9. All new code you're writing it first in 1.9. You're just letting CI system make sure that your 1.8 stuff is good. Then we have a number of pre-release environments, staging, dev, internal. We have a bunch of various ones. We just went through those one at a time. Each time we cut an environment over, we learned a little bit more about the procedure. We say, oh, well, it turns out that if you change which version of Ruby you're running and then do a graceful restart in Unicorn, that you will not have a good time. And you kind of just work through this, and you've got to practice your rollback. When it comes to production time, you're going to want to roll back. Your staging environments are a good opportunity to do this. So we took our main staging environment, went forward, and we went back. And we went forward, and we went back. And we took it back and forth 3 times in the week before we went to production.
And keeping that rollback process really simple is really important, so that it's not, if it's a one-line config change or a single command, that's what you want. No reverting commits if you don't have to.
We use Monet still to kind of manage our processes. And so for us, it was a matter of changing our Monet config to change the rbenv_version environment variable, and then you'd push that forwards and back. But we could have made it easier, and I think that would have been nicer. So You've been at this now 6 months. You are ready. The big day is here. It's time to do the rollout. One of the things that we learned the hard way, the expensive way, was you need to roll out your servers one by one in case you have to go back, and you need to have extra capacity available. We had 3 app servers, and it turned out that we were not able to run the site smoothly on 2. We thought we were, but we hadn't practiced it. So we took 1 app server out to upgrade it to Ruby 1.9, and the site pretty much went to hell. That was embarrassing. So the next time we did a major infrastructure improvement, we added an entirely new app server that week before doing the upgrade. So we knew that we had a whole server worth of spare capacity. The other thing that we learned was you have to be patient. The problems that arise during a rollout in production may not arise immediately. So we actually did roll back our production environment the first time we did it. So we took the production environment, went forward to 1.9, didn't work, it blew up immediately, we rolled back. Then, we fixed that problem. We went in the next week, rolled to 1.9, it looked like it worked, we started rolling the servers, it didn't really work. So we had to do some pretty emergency patching work. Thank you again, John. Of course, you also broke it. But so when you're rolling forwards, it's really exciting. You've been at this project for a long time, but be patient. Give it time to bake on each server. The other thing that's implied in this list is if you're rolling your servers out one by one, you need to have it so that your app can be writing to the same database from servers running different versions of Ruby. So, one app server might be running Ruby 1.8, and one app server is running Ruby 1.9, and they're both talking to the same backend. The only place that's going to be a little bit odd is if you have UTF-8 stuff, encoding issues. But keep an eye out for it. You want to build your app so that you can do this. Otherwise, you need to shut the whole thing down in order to do your upgrade and bring it up. And you certainly don't want to be in a situation where if you were to switch to 1.9, write data to the database, switch back to 1.8, that you would no longer have a readable database. So be careful around the encoding. This is what we got. For people who don't know the New Relic UI maybe as well as we do, the top one is the time as measured at the browser by our JavaScript hooks, and the bottom one is your traditional app server time breakdown. That red line is our little downtime as we did this. As you can see, there's a huge improvement in performance. The amount of time spent in garbage collection was cut by like 75% in our app. It was a huge difference. Not shown here is that the CPU burn on our app servers dropped by half. So the load on our app servers was like 75% before going into this. It was like 40% coming out of it. It was an amazing savings for us. It was essentially an entire free app server worth of CPU. And that top one that shows to the end user means that even in all of the noise in your app of JavaScript loading and pages actually downloading and assets, the change to 1.9 was visible to users. This made enough of an effect that each page was visibly faster to users.
So we learned some lessons kind of pretty early about how we wanted to really proceed with doing this upgrade. Do it in master, just deploy the changes that are necessary continuously, use the same code base in both new environments. But after the fact, we thought there were some things that we could have done a little bit better. And one was to share the knowledge about the upgrade, like what's different in 1.9, and try to involve everybody in as much as possible in working on those tests and in writing new code that will be 1.9 compatible. Because we did have a few regressions along the way to burning down all the test failures. And I think if we had spent a little more time like making it really easy to work in both environments, to test in both environments, to see what the gotchas were in 1.9, we could have made that not just have the work done faster because more people are working in parallel, But make it so that whenever we cut over, like everybody understands 1.9 and there's nothing to worry about. So we could test locally, and it would involve, I've got my repo and I bundle install and I test and I run the test suite. It takes a little while, and then I switch my Ruby version and I bundle again, and then I run the tests again. And that's no one really wants to do that. That's not easy. We didn't really even write a rig task that would just automate all that for you, and we could have done it at least that. So what we often just did was, okay, I'm in 1.9, tests are passing now, cool. I'll rely on CI to make sure that it still works in our production 1.8 environment, and that's okay. But it would have been great to say, like, run both things in parallel on my machine before I commit. And finally, our background jobs were one of those big sources of no test coverage. And if you can guess why, there's a lot of code in the background jobs that should have just been in a model, and the background job should have been like one method call. But instead, there's a lot of logic in the job itself, in the script, basically. And so we ended up moving a lot of that stuff out to models that we were just going to keep tested like everything else. And that was a pretty big win for the whole app, and also made us be able to deploy this to production without all of our jobs failing. Wow.
Yeah, oh, bastard.
Hellish Moonscape? What is that? No, it looks pretty nice.
My presentation's been suspended. Thanks, Apple. We're just going to click through these this way.
So the pattern that we followed, and eventually what we thought were good practices in doing this upgrade, are something that we got to apply again recently, and we're going to get to apply again and again, because we're going to be upgrading Rails, we're going to be upgrading Ruby to 2.0, and this is just something that people who develop software that you have to maintain have to do. So Andrew, one of the guys who worked on the Ruby upgrade, and Julian is another engineer on our team in San Francisco. They were largely responsible for the Rails 3 upgrade we did. And that was harder. That was kind of a lot more total work, I think.
The gem file trick did not work for Rails 3.
Yeah, we had some interesting hacks to get gems to work easily. But these guys will be talking about how they did essentially the kind of thing that we did to upgrade Ruby, but they did it better. And they'll be talking about that at RailsConf in Portland this year. So please come see it if you're interested in these kind of stories.
It certainly had a smoother launch.
Yeah, I think there was a code change to change over, but it was like 3 lines of code in that commit.
And if you really like this type of topic, we are, of course, hiring, both in the site engineering and in the core developer teams. So here's our plug. Come and work in the beautiful office tower there in downtown Portland. And you can admire our billboard to come in. I actually haven't seen the billboard myself yet. That's it for us, and apparently for the battery on my laptop. To make way for the lightning talkers, I'm going to step down and we'll take questions on the floor. So just, if you want to know anything about how we did it, just come and find us. We're going to be here. Thanks.
Thanks.